Basic Brewing Radio is sponsored in part by the American Homebrewers Association. This February, the American Homebrewers Association encourages you to show your homebrew equipment some love by getting it cleaned up for your next brew day. Use promo code CLEAN to receive free PBW cleaning tablets when you join or renew your AHA membership in February or while supplies last. Visit homebrewersassociation.org/basicbrewing for details. Get your free PBW with promo code CLEAN and find February inspiration with recipes for winter seasonals and craft beer clones, beer and food pairing suggestions, and much more by visiting homebrewersassociation.org/basicbrewing today. That's homebrewersassociation.org/basicbrewing with the promo code CLEAN. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, February 10th, 2022. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Andy Coates from Ozark Beer Company and I talk about hazy beers, small batch blended barrel beers, and new equipment that allows Ozark to streamline their process and improve their brews. If you go to basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows, and if you go to basicbrewingshop.com, you can find our DVDs and our brewers' logbooks. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Basic Brewing, and find our show page on Facebook as well. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing, and many thanks to everybody who's helping out in that way. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. I'm really excited about my latest beer. Finally, on January 30th, I brewed a really simple Pilsner and fermented it in my basement, which is at 60 degrees Fahrenheit or 15.5 C, with L26 Pilgrimage from our friends and sponsors at Imperial Organic Yeast. And by the next morning, that yeast was chugging along vigorously, even in those cool temperatures. On day 4, I looked down there and fermentation had slowed, and the yeast was still up in suspension, so I brought it upstairs and added 3 pounds or 1.4 kilograms of that passion fruit puree that I've been wanting to use for a long time. I stirred up the beer to get all of that yeast back up into suspension, and the fermentation kicked into high gear in a hurry. In fact, activity was pretty much done in the next day or so. So on February 8th, that's day 9, as I figure, I took a gravity reading, and it had gone from an original gravity of 1050 to a final gravity of 1008. So I kegged it, and I have to tell you, it tastes really good. It tastes so good. There's just a bit of tartness from the passion fruit on top of the very clean base beer, and I have to tell you, I took a sip a couple of minutes ago, and to me, it tastes just like the candy sweet tarts. Just tart enough, it's a little teeny bit sweet, but it's a little teeny bit tart as well, and just a nice balance in there. And boy, I could have drank a whole pint of it, but I had to do this thing. It's hazy. Probably could have used some pectic enzymes to clear it out a bit, but these days I don't mind hazy as long as it tastes good. Can't wait to share it with Steve. It's February's going to be moister than January, if as opposed to the dry January. I hope everybody's dry January went well. If you tried that out, like I say, I've been saying on the show, I did the moist January, and I've seen some results. So nobody likes to talk about what they're eating, or everybody likes to talk about what they're eating. Nobody likes to listen to what people are doing. So I'm moving on. I've got another pack of L26 Pilgrimage that I used to ferment the sweet tart beer from Imperial Organic Yeast. And I've got some fun ideas on what to do. It's a winter seasonal L26 Pilgrimage is from Imperial. L26 Pilgrimage is a favorite of professional brewers, they say, and we're fortunate as home brewers that we have access to it during the winter months. Pilgrimage will provide or produce lagers with a very clean profile that accentuates the flavors and aroma of Pilsner malt and noble hops, and I can attest to that. My base beer was delicious just on its own. We love Imperial Organic Yeast with a pitch rate of 200 billion cells in each easy-to-open package. I like to say my airlocks are usually bubbling before bedtime. And my stir plate is dusty because I don't use it anymore to make starters for moderate gravity 5-gallon batches. Even with this lager, which fermented, at a cool temperature, I usually would have made a starter to do a lager, but not with Imperial. Ask your local homebrew store about L26 Pilgrimage from Imperial Organic Yeast, and check them out at imperialyeast.com. Well, fans of the archives know that Ozark Beer Company is one of the breweries that we've been following since the beginning. Andy Coates and Lacey Bray told us on the show way back when that they were planning to start a brewery. Andy was brewing at the little West Mountain Brewery at that time. He helped them get started in their brewing there on premises. Since then, Ozark beers have become a fixture of grocery stores and liquor stores in the area. Thank goodness. Even the one down just within walking distance, theoretically, of my house. And their growing number of innovative small batch beers are pushing the boundaries and expanding the palates of Northwest Arkansas. Andy Coates, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thanks for having me. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time. I thought, and I say this, I've said it in like the past 5 episodes. It doesn't feel like it's been this long since we've gotten together, but it was 2017, I think, when we last sat across one of these tables and sampled beers and listened to the trains go by.
Yeah, that's right. No, we're a lot's happened in those couple years, and we're glad to have you back.
And we do have a train going through.
We do. We get about 9 or 10 trains a day, so it's pretty fun to be on conference calls or podcasts like this, and we all have to hit a pause and wait for it to roll on by.
I like it. and sitting with me on my bench is Susan.
Hi.
And that may be all she says during the show. But we've got a bevy of beers here to sample. Let's go back in time a couple years ago, this month or next month, when the pandemic started. You guys suffered a setback pretty quickly.
Yeah, so we had been watching, obviously, as many people did, watching our friends on the coasts and in larger cities, and talked to a few of our friends in Seattle that were brewers and kind of seeing what was going on there early on in the pandemic, and before we all knew it was as big as it has been, and we kind of saw the writing on the wall. So we started making some plans pretty early on, and pretty much when things started to shut down, we were, I believe, the first brewery or one of the first businesses here locally that pretty much said, hey, this is a big deal. We're laying everybody off, so hopefully there's something to come back to, and help us out if you can, buy some beers, and stay safe, and here we go. So
was that a proactive measure at that point?
Very much so. So at the time, we knew we could pay payroll for like 3 weeks. We had done one full payroll, and we knew we had another one plus a week of operational cash. And so pretty much, obviously, we were shut down by the state, and obviously we didn't mind that overall at the time, thinking it was going to be a couple weeks, and then seeing the writing on the wall that this is going to be a much longer scenario. So basically, it was a proactive step to be like, hey, we need to save as much money as we can and hoard some cash as much as we can, sell as much beer as we can, and hopefully have something for everybody to come back to.
And how long was it before you got back on your feet?
So we basically ran a skeleton crew. So Lacey and myself, and then our first employee, her uncle Kobe, he worked with us, just came in and helped me out doing some packaging on the side. And then Brant, one of our brewers, he was our backup in case I got sick. But basically it was pretty much the 3 or 4 of us for quite a while. Marty, on our marketing director, he just did some work from home. Pretty much was really cool about it. If there's anything cool about the first weeks of the pandemic is obviously the outpouring of support we had from our community, which was great. We try to see ourselves as a community-focused brewery. But really, like, our team we have here, our staff, pretty much everyone offered to come work for free. Everyone continued to do their jobs a little bit on the side as they could. Marty kept up with the emails, our social media, kept in contact. And so we made everybody whole on the back end as much as we could, but it was obviously a paradigm shift for not just our world, but the whole world. So, yeah, it was intense.
So what got you back? I mean, what was it? Was it government assistance, or what was it?
Yeah, so the PPP obviously helped out. Until that came through, we pretty much shifted, that first week after everything kind of got settled, we realized, okay, people are still buying beer. This is great. We were fortunate enough to be in quite a number of grocery stores, and so the trajectory there, the run rates were huge. And we had enough beer brewed to get by for a bit. And so really we shifted. Tap rooms were closed, restaurants and bars were closed. And so we happened to have 7 garage doors in our giant warehouse. And we have an alley with a back area and a nice exit on the exact other side. So we pivoted to a drive-through. So we brought our tap room staff back and basically did a drive-through beer service. So you could make a reservation online and pay for it online. We do contactless, just load it in your trunk. You could roll on through, grab some cans, we could fill some growlers for you. So we really shifted to that and did that for a number of months. And surprisingly, maybe not so surprisingly because everyone was stuck at home and there's not a whole lot to do but drink beers and hit the internet and hopefully read some books. But our numbers in terms of taproom revenue were not down, which was impressive. So it's very strange to say that financially the business is in the best space it's ever been, just because we had the PPP and then that allowed us to float. We were still making revenue where a lot of businesses that were, restaurants were physically closed. We were still able to, produce, package, and sell beer. So we ended up in a pretty good spot, able to bring everybody back for a certain amount of time. And then we cut a few permanent positions and we've kind of reorganized and just put people in different spots. It's been really kind of a chess game, to be honest, about figuring the best spots for everybody, but also finding things for people to do that they actually like to do versus just, hey, this is now your job because so-and-so isn't doing it anymore. So no, I can't talk enough about our team and really how well everyone took care of each other.
And you're making delicious beer, obviously, by what's in front of us. Susan, my driver snagged one of the samples, the small samples. But where should we start? These are mostly small batches.
Yeah, so our small batch beers, they're pretty much made by, we have 2 of our full-time brewers, Teddy Pepper and Brant Bishop. And Teddy has pretty much spearheaded our small batch and like R&D side. Mostly anything Belgian. We have a lot of barrel-aged offerings. Usually we always have at least one mixed culture or Brett beer on draft or in package, and that is Brant's kind of his baby. Our basement, for those of you who haven't been here, we're in an old 1890s flour mill that was then a moving company. So it's a timber frame building, and we have to have an awesome basement, which stays really constant temperature all year. It's got 3-foot thick concrete walls, the whole 9 yards. So anyway, we have a lot of barrels downstairs that we started back in January of 2019. And so we had 16 wine barrels from Napa that we inoculated with 4 different Brett strains, or 3 different Brett strains, and the 4th one was a mix of all 3. And so those have been kind of hanging out for years, and Brant has been blending them, adding fruit to them, doing a lot of cool stuff. So I can't talk enough about Teddy Pepper and Brant Bishop and frankly what they've brought here to this area in terms of small batch beers. So we just ran out of a couple beers. One of my favorites was a smoked black lager that ran out literally yesterday. But we have some pretty cool beers. I'd probably start with the Line Burner, just because it's a little 4% pale ale, super light bodied. It's Simcoe, Laurel, and Citra. We had a lot of high alcohol volume or high ABV beers on, and so we kind of wanted just to brew something up that would be a quick turnaround, but also something for folks to sip on that. My drinking style is more low ABV beers just because I like to drink more beers. But at the time we had a 9% double IPA on. We had some bourbon barrel-aged beers. We had, a larger Brett beer. We had a quad. So this kind of fills in a gap.
Yeah, you're known for your what is the
BDCS? So bourbon double cream stout.
I'm a little dyslexic sometimes, so
that's all right. BC, BS, BCDS. There's some B's and D's and S's. That's no big deal.
which is a giant, it is a giant, delicious beer that we sampled. Go back in the archives, and you'll hear me hear my eyes roll as I'm tasting that one. This is really good. It reminds me, if I can pat myself on the back, of my little 2% rye wit beer that I make. That's like it's only wheat and malted rye, and because of the viscosity of the rye, it pumps up the body of the beer, so it's nicely, it's got a nice mouthfeel, but it's very light. But then there's those delicious hops that are very bright on top of that, and it's super easy drinking. And you got to have something like this on the menu, right?
Yeah, no, that's what we found too. Is we can use the big sexy hops and actually throw them in a smaller beer, and they actually come through a bit more. They're not competing with anything else. So that's something I'd like to explore more personally. Is just I could drink American pale ales and dry farmhouse beers, and no one would come to my brewery. That's what Lacey always tells me, that like if we only made what you want to drink, then nobody would show up. I think there's plenty of people that would show up, but no, it's nice to have beers like this on the lineup for sure.
So what's the key to that? I mean, where do the hops enter into it?
So this would be Teddy's background. So Teddy's way into hazy beers. We kind of, wouldn't say anti-hazy for a long time, but we did not join the club as quick as everybody else. So basically, this is mostly on the back end. So dry hop focused, whirlpool focused. We've even started to basically knock down our temperature, which I think a lot of homebrewers might do, is knock your temp down before your whirlpool. So, do some cooling and then add those below like 180-ish. So we've started to do that on some of these smaller beers and then the hazies, obviously, and have just seen a lot better aroma and flavor from the hops. Obviously, not extracting as much bitterness, but it's been a lot more balanced and less harsh.
Yeah, it's a conversation I've had, and we've done some experiments on it too, where I've done hop stands at different temperatures and different times. But if we as homebrewers, if we want to mimic what you guys do in the whirlpool, our post boil temperatures are going to act differently from yours because of the volume. So if we can experiment with like stabilizing those temperatures at sweet spots, then we can squeeze some of the juice out of these juicy hops and not volatilize them off. Not boil them off for the neighbors to smell.
For sure. Now that's one of the things I think that I'm out of touch with, as I've been doing this, I guess, almost 16 years now, is that there's all these new hops that I've never even heard of, which is really kind of cool, and also a bit intimidating. When the nice thing is the guys I work with are pretty into knowing about what's going on. So we'll track down a lot of new hops. We just used one called Zappa, which is like Fruity Pebbles. It's a Neo-Mexicanus, and that's in this hazy beer that you'll try, the space-themed hazy, which is over here somewhere.
There it is.
This guy. So yeah, it's really kind of neat what the hop growers are doing. Obviously, it's more like wine varietals with the crossbreeding and finding those sweet spots. But that's a really cool beer, I think.
It's a bigger beer.
Yeah. And that's the funny thing is, I think we go in cycles of where we have a lot of low ABV beers, and then we're like, oh, we need to brew something bigger, and then we'll do one or two of those, and then the lower ones run out, and then all we have are high ABV. So it's kind of a funny cycle, but that comes in just under 9%.
9%.
And we used the one thing too, besides the new hops everywhere, are these new yeast strains. I think that's where it's really kind of neat to. Omega yeast, if y'all haven't checked them out, I know they do homebrew sizes now. This was made with their Cosmic Punch, which is a thiolized yeast strain. They figured out some genetic engineering to activate something that the yeast can eat. So we actually mash hop this, and they did some studies on hops that have higher thiol. So like Cascade is one of them. I think even Saz is high in thiols, and then Nugget has some. If you go to their website, Omega Yeast, I'm not sure the exact URL, but there's a bunch of cool information. But basically, you mash hops, so you put the thiols in there, then this yeast strain is able to metabolize them and throw some really cool, punchy aromas. So check it out.
I like the descriptor of Fruity Pebbles. I don't know that I would have come up with that, but it's a fun one, and I think I could be talked into that. It's nice and fruity, but of course, Andy, that hazy beers are going to kill craft beer, and they're ruining the industry.
Yeah. The funny thing is, we joke a lot about you can take, as long as you have decent process and it's composed well in terms of not too bitter, that a lot of hazy beers are pretty similar. The good ones, I think what we have found, and Teddy's done most of all of this, is the water chemistry can really set apart the hazies that are really drinkable and that you want to have a couple of, or ones that are just, this is just another hazy, or if it lacks body, things like that. So the mouthfeel, I think, is a component that I think all of us should strive to hit.
No, I of course was joking. I love them. Any beer style that's good, I love. There's always the speed bump of acceptance that people go through. When a new style comes, something's different. Now the glitter beers have come and gone, and I think the brute IPAs have come and gone, but the hazy ones I think are sticking.
Now we're just on cold IPA, which I think is just an India Pale Lager, but
yeah.
I have yet to be convinced.
Yeah, when I heard of that one, I was like, "Hey, are we doing that already?"
Exactly right. I think we are.
Let's take a quick break from sampling to talk about our friends and sponsors, Ricky and Kelly from Groenfell and Havoc Meaderies up in Vermont. I told Ricky, the mead maker, that I was going to be tasting some deliciously tart beers this week, and he suggested I talk about Nordic Farmhouse from Groenfell. Nordic Farmhouse is a Saison-style mead with cranberries. It's inspired by Scandinavian meads, crisp and a little funky, with a blend of floral honey, tart cranberries, and wild yeast. That's right, Nordic Farmhouse is fermented with 100% naturally occurring yeast, so each batch has its own unique character. And at 5.7% ABV, it's deliciously drinkable. I love how Groenfell and Havoc are producing a range of beverages, from the traditional delicious basic meads to something wild and a little unpredictable, like Nordic Farmhouse. Look for it in other tasty honey-based creations and have some sent to yourself at family-owned and operated Groenfell.com. That's GROENNFELL. So you've got some new toys to play with that you showed us in the brewery. What all have you got going on since we've been here, 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, so we've obviously made a few changes. We upped our fermentation capacity probably by double or triple since last time you were here. So last year we made just over 5,300 barrels. So we're the second largest producer in the state, which, if any of you listening know, we're not that big. But yeah, so we dropped in a bunch of 60-barrel fermentation vessels. We upgraded our Wild Goose canning line that we got back in 2015 to a 4-head filler, and all the upgrades and engineering changes they've made, which has been really nice. We dropped in a centrifuge, so our separator, instead of filtration, basically everything's unfiltered. It's just moving sediment out. So our beer, we've noticed a big difference just in the aroma on the finished beer. We were doing biofine for a while, and then we did some plate and frame filtration. And basically, it was always just kind of a pain. There was a lot of loss. The time aspect was huge. We didn't like the environmental aspect of throwing away pads. You might switch out 30, 60, 90 in a day. And so basically a centrifuge, we get more beer, better beer, and it's an easier day, which kind of bookends into our other big thing we finally did was we got a new brew house. So we had been brewing on a 1996 15-barrel pub system, which was not made for production brewing at all. It was a little copper showpiece. They made a bunch of them in the mid to late 90s. They went under soon after that, but there's a lot of them floating around. You all can see some pictures on the internet. So basically we had used that for years. We were the third owners of it, and we put, I believe, over 2,300 brews on it. And we bought it from a production brewery outside of San Francisco, so they put it through the ringer also. So basically the steam jackets started to blow on the kettle, so we got a new kettle and made the old kettle into a whirlpool, so we had a 3-vessel system. So we were basically brewing 30 barrels a day. We got it under 12 hours. So we were doing pretty much 6 to 6, 5 days a week. So dropping in the 30-barrel brew house, which we, obviously pandemic timing, supply chain issues, was supposed to be here last May, and we finally got it installed this last November, just a couple months ago. So no, it's been a nice change. So we dropped into 30 with a bit of automation, which is kind of nice, but really it allows us, as I told you all earlier, we're not trying to make a lot more beer. We're trying to have a better day for all of us. So essentially, if somebody had to, they could be brewing a 30-barrel batch and centrifuging 90 to 120 barrels by themselves. It'd be a banger of a day, but you could do it. So yeah, efficiency is what we're going for.
And what difference does do all beers go through the centrifuge? I mean, even the hazy ones?
So yeah, we do actually centrifuge our hazies. We just do it really fast. So basically, the nice thing, the one thing about hazy beers on a commercial production is there's a lot of, obviously we're using a lot of hops. And so it's usually beer that you can't use or finish. With the centrifuge, and we can basically go into that hop cone toward the bottom and slowly sift out the hops. So we're actually extracting all the beer we'd usually dump.
Wow.
So on that side, it actually is great for hazy beers. It really just gets the chunks out. I think all of us have opened cans of beer and poured them into a glass, and it's like you see pieces of hops, and you're getting yeast chunks, and that's not really what any of us want. I think that's maybe why we pushed back on hazies for a while, is because there were some that were doing really well and tasted great and looked great, and there were plenty that weren't. So centrifuge, yeah, it's really, really helped us out on the yield side, but we're not stripping out any of the flavors and aromas that we're going for.
And the haze remains, though. That's the amazing thing to me, is that it was my assumption, at least in the beginning, that some of the haze was due to yeast and suspension, and I've talked to other commercial brewers in the area who've had trouble with hazy beer, like canning it or bottling it and having it go clear after a while, but you don't have that problem.
No, so we focus on the hot side really, with basically the mash bill, in figuring out, basically the haze is a byproduct of our process. It's not the goal. So we're putting in, tons of oats, a lot of wheat, malted and unmalted, any other adjuncts we use, and basically getting that haze there, and then obviously choosing the right yeast strain. I think that's the other hard side on a production scale is your yeast cost. It's really hard to harvest and repitch. So we pretty much prop up a new hazy pitch every time we brew it. And I think a lot of people aren't. They're trying to use other yeasts and just get the haze from the adjunct side and not the yeast side. So yeah, finding those low flocculators and getting them going, we have not had trouble with that. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So where should we head next?
It's kind of out of order, but I would try the second sundown.
Oh, Susan's getting the other stout.
So this is a mixed culture beer. So this beer is one of the ones I mentioned that Brant does in the basement. That I believe one of them, it's a blend of 3 barrels, and one of them is, I think, a Brett Brooks of the original from January 2019, and then the other barrel was actually Oktoberfest wort that we partially fermented when we made Oktoberfest 2 years ago, and then about halfway done, put it in a barrel with Brett, and then we joke this is our Russian River collaboration because we poured in some dregs from a couple little bottles that Teddy got when he was out in Santa Rosa. So basically, we've just let it sit and sit and sit. And so then he blended back with a third beer. So basically, it's a blend of I don't know. I should look at the board. I believe it's 12 to 36 or 39-month-old beers with a bunch of bugs, Brett Lactopedio. So yeah, it's really interesting.
It's got a lot of body for something that's been on all those bugs.
Yeah, no, that's I think where anybody can make beer and throw it in a barrel and pour stuff in. I think that's where these guys are doing a really good job. Is we want it to not only be something a bit exotic, but it needs to taste good and represent well. We try to almost always have some sort of Brett or mixed culture beer on draft, which is kind of cool. There's not many folks doing that. I think it's the time aspect of just getting beer in barrels and letting it sit and try investing that time and money and letting it go for that long till they're ready is difficult from a time, space, and cash standpoint. It almost has like a creamy mouthfeel to it. There is some acetic acid, which lends to the body, and that was on purpose. And so basically, Brant has kind of, whenever I see him go in the basement, we always kind of smile because he'll come back up with a bunch of samples, and we don't ask what they are. He doesn't tell us what they are. He'll let us try them and say, what you like, here's what they are, and we pour some and blend them and kind of see the direction. But that's the hardest thing is, like you said, with the bugs eating everything that's left, how do we make this something that's pleasurable and drinkable and not just thin beer with a weird aroma?
Yeah, it is tart, and I don't know what the pH is on it, but it is nicely tart, but there's not the kind of astringency on the back of the tongue that a lot of tart beers have, and I think it's because there is a substantial body. It's a copper-colored beer. It wouldn't fit in any style descriptor. It's just a nice, fun like tart beer.
A mixed culture, goldenish. Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, it's got some bread character in there as well, an Orvali kind of Brett character that I like a lot. That's a fun beer, and I would drink a pint of that and be happy, which is, not what I say about all sour beers or tart beers.
Right, and that's, I think, our goal with all the beers we make, and always has been, is drinkability. It's our question is, would you drink a second one if there was nothing else available, or would you say, no, I'm good? So finding that kind of sweet spot, especially, as you know, like the area here is blossomed in a really nice way in beer and in population and in lots of things, but we're still catching up. And so we want people's introduction to a Brett beer, any types of sour. We want it to be a pleasant one and not just extreme in any direction where it's like, oh, why do people drink sour beers? It's like, oh, because you have a tummy ache and your teeth hurt. And, it's like, oh, we want this to be something that doesn't wreck your palate, that you want to have a second of. And we have plenty of folks that come in who don't know what Brettanomyces is. And usually we abbreviate Brett beers, and people are like, who's Brett? And like things like that. And so we try to make it really accessible and like something that isn't too upscale where people don't want to try it. And we get a lot of folks a lot of wine drinkers, obviously, who are like, oh, this is fabulous. I like this. This is my jam. So
at the same time, on the wine side of things, Brett is a scary thing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. No, it's really wild how the beer side is embraced. I guess natural wines are coming around more and more, but it's like, no, we'd love to have it.
So we're now. Ooh, I want to save that one for last.
Yeah, I would go A-frame.
This is A-frame?
Yeah, so this is just kind of a winter-inspired IPA. So we use both flaked and malted rye. And
I was going to say, there's this. I don't usually get spice from rye, but I do on this one on the nose. I smelled it and I was like, oh, it smells like rye bread.
No, so we introduced an IPA rotating, basically seasonal SKU. So we did an all Pilsen and it was all Pilsen malt, and then we used a single hop for El Dorado. For kind of our summer IPA. Then we did kind of a classic Colorado throwback. We call it a Colorado-style IPA, which isn't really a thing. We call it 40 Miles from Denver. We did that all fall. And then this one we released a number of weeks ago, I guess early January. And that's kind of our winter seasonal IPA. So like I said, malted and flaked rye, some caramel malt, a splash of dark chocolate malt for some color, and then it's just classic C hops. So it's Crystal, Chinook, Cascade, and Centennial. So, I mean, it just really, this is what you might have had in 1998 in Oregon.
That's really good. That's just really super drinkable and good. It's got a fairly chewy mouthfeel, which you would expect especially with the malted rye, but it's not sticky. I assume it's around 5%.
Yeah, it's just almost right at 6. But yeah, no, I've been really liking it. This is something we had the idea for a while back, and it kind of comes to the same thing we talked about, like what we call things and how we communicate what things are. If you called this like a red IPA, I don't know that people would buy it. Huh. We call it a winter IPA. It just sounds different and easier to get. So it's been selling really well. And then we talked about hazy beers, but our spring into summer IPA rotator is going to be a hazy beer. So the Ozark Haze is coming back.
Again, you're ruining the business.
No doubt.
You're ruining our palates. For this little break, let's read some email. Listener Keith writes in with this. I was thinking of getting a 240-volt brew system. Do you have a special plug or put on a plug to match your house plug? I'm thinking of getting a high-gravity brew. Well, first off, Keith, I think you're on the right track thinking about getting your electric system from our friends and sponsors Desiree and Dave from HighGravityBrew.com. Dave builds the Word Hog electric systems from HighGravityBrew.com right there in the store in Tulsa. So he'd be glad, I'm sure, to put a plug of your choice on your cable to fit your wants and desires. On my 240-volt brew-in-a-bag system, I asked Dave to put a plug like the one on my clothes dryer. That's because in the beginning I was unplugging the dryer when I wanted to brew. Well, as you can imagine, that wasn't popular in the household, so I had a local electrician wire a new plug near the doggy door so I can brew inside or out. Brilliant! Steve Wilkes has the smaller 120-volt version of the system, so he can plug in anywhere in his house and not get in trouble. Whatever your electric needs, Dave and Desiree at HighGravityBrew.com can take the pain out of propane with a system designed to fit your specifications. From 5 gallons to 2 barrels, single, dual, or 3-vessel, use the code EBC75BB. That's EBC75BB at HighGravityBrew.com to take $75 off a Word Hog electric system or controller of your choice. That's family-owned and operated, HighGravityBrew.com. That's HighGravityBrew.com. What should we? She took my stouts. The cream stout and the coffee stouts are gone. But I've had those. But I've had those before. I brought an empty growler, so maybe that's what we do.
This next one comes out tomorrow. So we pulled this off the tank, just carved it up this morning. This is called Dollar Store Elvis. We were in a meeting one day, and Marty, our marketing director, we were talking about somebody, and he's like, man, that guy just looks like a dollar store Elvis. And so that made the whiteboard, and finally got to be participated with the beer. So this, with our new brew house, obviously we did a lot of small batch beers, and we actually just bought a little 7-barrel direct fire to do small batch beers, which Teddy's pretty much going to take over. So we're kind of in a transition. So we did something kind of fun. So with the hazy beer, the space-themed hazy, because every hazy needs to have a space name in it, we basically brewed the same wort and pre-whirlpool knocked out half of it to one fermentation vessel and threw in the Orval strain, and then did all the whirlpool hopping and did the thiol cosmic yeast, the cosmic punch from Omega I mentioned earlier, and made the space theme. So the space themed double and this beer have the same exact malt bill, just different yeast and the back addition on the hops. So this came out, so it finished at 0-0. It was pretty dry and it stalled. This yeast is known to be finicky. And so we actually threw in some vodka distiller's yeast, which eats everything. So we were hoping it would finish around 1 Play-Doh, and it zeroed out.
Oh, wow.
So the nice thing about Brant having the barrels in the basement, he just did a bunch of blending. We had 5 wine barrels open, so we took half the batch and filled those. So they'll be inoculated with Brett and mixed culture. And then with the rest of it, the other half, which is about 7 barrels or so, we threw in 220 pounds of raspberry puree.
The kind you'd find in a secondhand store. No, that's something else.
Exactly. So it's a really cool beer. It comes in at, after the fruit edition, at 10.7, which is pretty high, but the yeast really shines through, and with the fruit, I think it's really cool. When I first poured it for you, you mentioned some clove, a little bit of spice, which is neat. Teddy just tried it this morning. I mentioned to him that we were going to put it on tomorrow, and he's like, I got strawberry banana, which is kind of cool with the fruit and the yeast. So it's definitely Belgian forward, and then fixed up a bit with some raspberries.
Yeah. Whereas before I got cinnamon and clove, now I'm getting on the nose. It's very, very floral in a kind of not quite grandma's bathroom, but it's perfumey, floral. And then the fruit really shines through, but there's that funk that goes along with it. But then there's the mouthfeel. So a previous. I take it that the previous, before you fixed it, it was not as chewy as this is.
For sure. No, being zeroed out with nothing left. I mean, there was no body to it. It was extremely boozy, which it still is. You get that booze character on the nose and obviously on the flavor, but the fruit really, really rounded it out. So it's kind of nice to have something like, it was going to be a good beer either way, but the fruit here definitely helped us out.
Susan, you got to try it. I won't make you talk, but you got to at least sip it. She's not the biggest sour fan, but I think
It's not too sour.
not too sour. But is it good?
Yeah.
Yeah, she likes it. Hey, Mikey, she likes it. No, that's really good, and that's another one where this comes in a. Is it a goblet or a snifter or a
I poured you a tulip, but we serve it in like an 11-ounce pour, like a teku, like a more of a wine glass pour. That's how we serve our Brett beers also.
It's really good, and that's enjoyable enough for me to finish a whole one. It's not just like a 1-ounce sample, and ooh, that's fun. It's drinkable.
Now, so we're excited about putting that on tomorrow. We're sending a small amount to the market, and then, like I said, the rest of it's hanging out in the basement for a while. So.
Now, you used to, on the cans, I think it just said just made for Arkansas or just for Arkansas, but that's not the case anymore, right?
No, so we're actually, we had plans before the pandemic to start distributing in Southwest Missouri. When we started the brewery with the name Ozark, we really thought that that's the direction we'd head, that our brand would fit that part of the country a lot better than, so like if you haven't been to Arkansas or this area and you're listening, Little Rock, Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Arkansas, Jonesboro, Arkansas are really kind of different planets than where we are in the state. Somebody up in Springfield, Missouri that works at the distributorship we use, he basically said the Ozarks should be its own state, which I wholeheartedly agree with, because where they are in Springfield, Missouri is night and day from Kansas City or St. Louis or even like northern Missouri when you get to Iowa where I grew up. So it's really interesting that I think the culture of the Ozarks, people identify more as a place versus state lines and things like that. So we had plans before the pandemic, like I mentioned, to distribute there, and eventually after waiting a year just said, hey, we've got some beer, we have this relationship, let's just get some beer up there, and then when the time comes, we can kind of push that direction. And so that's what we've done. So if you're in Southwest Missouri, in the Joplin, Springfield, Branson area, you can find our beers at most liquor stores, most Walmarts, the Price Cutters, and a few spots in between.
So next stop, regional? You're going up to Kansas City and down to New Orleans?
No, so we're, like I said, if our goal is to really, if we could service, most of our beer is sold in Benton, Washington County here in Northwest Arkansas. So we sell, I'd say 80% of our beer there. With our tap room here in Rogers, and we have a new satellite tap room that we opened up just this fall over in Bentonville. Ozark Beer at Row Pounds. If you're over in downtown Bentonville, you should check that out. Basically has all our small batch offerings. We have some cocktails there too, which is neat. But basically between these two outlets, Benton, Washington County, and then if we could focus on Southwest Missouri and kind of pull it back in where most all the beer was bought and sold within 100 miles of the brewery, that's kind of our focus now. So you can get our beer in far reaches of the state, but it's mostly fresh. It's hard to know that we're sending beer out to go die on a shelf somewhere 4 or 5 hours from here. So we're trying to kind of not claw back, but just be more focused on where we're putting beer and why.
Well, you got to find no matter if you're 30 barrels or 3 barrels, you got to find your niche and work it and be happy.
Yeah, no, that's the nice thing for us is our trajectory of sales is like beer sells really quickly. Basically, the beer we sent on a truck this morning, I was here before 6 and we canned it and went out on the truck. So it's like you're basically buying the beer we send out to our distributor this week will be on the shelf this week. So that's been really nice for us as we don't really have the problem. We should knock on some wood that it's moving fast enough we're able to keep up, but also supply a fresh product for everybody.
I've taken a sip of the I think is the last one since Susan took my stouts, and this tastes to me like an Acer. Have you ever had an Acer? It's a quote-unquote mead made out of maple syrup.
Okay.
So this to me, Susan took a sip earlier. Maybe she planted it in my mind, but she said, ooh, mapley.
Yeah.
And it is super mapley, and it says quad on my little card here.
This is a quad we made and put in a bourbon barrel. And I don't know the year. I think it was 2018 or 19. Probably 19. That makes more sense. And then we sold all of it, and we canned some of it, and we kept back, I think, like 4 or 5, 6 barrels. And so we put it on. So the body has gone down drastically. The carb is low, but more of those dried fruit, kind of in maple, like the more woody characters have come through. The spirit character is way down. It's oxidized a little bit in a good way. But yeah, it's a scarily drinkable 13% beer.
Oh my God. So yes, this is the proper serving size for that.
I think I've only ever had one in the history of the beer, and I was like, okay, that's enough.
Oh man, it's so good. It's something you want to sit by a fire, and read a book or watch some Olympics or whatever, and just sip on that. That is way good. And like I say, I think you hit it on the nose, Susan. It is maple syrup. It's just, I'm shocked that there's no maple in there, but I guess that's the combination of the wood character and the aging and, like you said, maybe oxidation, but all those come together, and and it would be great with pancakes.
Oh yeah, no, it's a really cool beer. This is our last keg. Actually, it's probably going to run out today or tomorrow. We have a couple cases of cans left, but we really just put it on kind of on a whim. Amy, our taproom manager, it was a first week of January, and we knew we were going to be slow just because it's cold and dry January, and January is always slow. And she was like, "Hey, let's put the quad on. It's sitting back there. We've been staring at it. Let's just put it on." So we did, and it's been really kind of cool to have people kind of float in and get a little taste.
But there is a sharpness to it. It's not flabby at all. It's not it's not too sweet. It is pretty sweet, but there's a sharpness there. Is that still hop bitterness, you think?
No, I think so. It was really dry when we put it in the barrels, and it picked up some astringency. So we actually blended in a really sugary beer. Long story, convoluted story. We went to a beer festival, the Rare Beer Fest at GABF in Denver, our first time we were there, and we were next to some folks who had a barrel-aged beer that they put in a barrel that had formerly had honey in it. So, a number of years back, we filled a bourbon barrel with honey, and then emptied it.
As you do.
As you do. And then emptied it and sold the bourbon barrel-aged honey, which was delicious. And then we took basically a farmhouse beer, more or less, basically a golden with a mostly fermented Belgian yeast strain, put it in there, and we were hoping, fingers crossed, that it would basically re-ferment all of that honey that was coating inside the barrel. So we'd get wood character, we'd get honey character, we'd have the Belgian-style character, and none of that happened. So over the course of about a year and a half, we just let it sit. It was in the corner. We added champagne yeast to it, did nothing. We added more Belgian yeast, did nothing. So basically, we added blueberries to it. And so blueberries sat in this. It was more basically, and the beer ended up being delicious. It should be served in like a cordial glass. We actually have one keg of it we saved before we blended it. But we ended up blending. The quad needed some sugar because it didn't have enough. So we actually took the honey barrel beer, which would have been hard to serve, and blended that back in.
Wow.
So it could never be recreated because of the convoluted nature of all of that. So
there's berries in there too.
Technically, yeah. So there was blueberries in the barrel with the beer, and then the beer got blended into the quad. So it's probably not really a Belgian quad. It's a Belgian style ale with extra.
But Belgian style, or Belgians allegedly abhor style guidelines anyway, or nooks for them to be put into. So it's probably appropriately described as a Belgian beer.
Yeah, and we used Belgian candy sugar. We tried to do it on traditionally as much as we could. So no, it's a pretty neat beer.
Wow, that's super good. We didn't talk about the one thing I wanted that was on my list to talk about was I saw that y'all had kombucha.
Yeah, so fermentation. We all love fermentation here. Amy, who's our taproom manager I mentioned earlier, and Lacey, who's my wife, they both make kombucha at home and have for years. And so we were throwing around ideas of how do we scale this up to have an NA offering on draft here. So it was about a year of R&D that they did before we even served it, which was really neat. So we bought a little 7-barrel tank, which is actually sitting in our tap room now because it's too cold in the warehouse. But they grew the SCOBY up over a number of months and just kept brewing tea, adding sugar, obviously finding out what worked, what didn't flavor-wise. And so we put out 2 different flavored batches of kombucha. The third, it just actually ran out, I believe, Saturday. So our third one will be on hopefully Friday. So they're using all natural fruits and herbs to flavor them, which is really kind of neat. I was not a big kombucha fan, and the fun thing is it's on draft, so you can just come get a splash every now and then. But the hardest thing for us was to get it below 0.5 and to make sure that we were compliant legally. And so basically just figuring out the sugar contents and how much juice we need to put in, how much tea to liquor it down with to also still make it taste good, because that's obviously what we're all going for, is something that tastes good, but that also be compliant under 0.5. So it's been cool. We've all learned quite a bit. It's a really healthy giant SCOBY, and they've done a really good job. No, it's pretty cool.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I wanted to get in a plug for that because I know that there are people who are really interested in it, and it's fun. There's I've had good and bad kombuchas, and I'm assuming that you would have a good one.
Yeah, no, like that's the nice thing is the base actually is really delicious by itself, even without adding any juice or flavorings to it. It's really tart. It smells great. Finding the blend of tea, the black and green tea, like proportions, was really difficult too. The astringency comes through really a lot if you brew it too long, or if you have too much black and not enough green, or too much green. So it's different steep times, different water temperatures. I think there was a lot more to it to getting it dialed in and making it repeatable than either of them thought. But it's been really kind of fun to let them kind of run with that and have them teach us something, frankly, about something we didn't know about. So.
And I've made dry hopped kombuchas, and we went up to Joplin to speak with Kim up at Creature Craft Sodas, and she had a really fun dry hopped kombucha. So maybe the worlds can collide here as well.
No, I find myself drinking more kombucha than I think I ever would have if it wasn't available. So no, I'm a huge fan.
Well, Andy, this has been a lot of fun. Let's not wait another 4 or 5 years till the next time.
I agree. Let's do it next year for sure.
Well, thanks again to Andy. I took home a growler of the space-themed hazy. So good. If you're in the area this week, Dollar Store Elvis is now on tap at the Ozark Beer Company tap room. I was privileged to have a pre-release sample, and boy, it was delicious as well. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form at basicbrewing.com. And please don't tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. So until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. Talk to you next time, everybody. In the meantime, stay well and stay tuned. So long.